It should be going live.
Hello, everyone. I do believe that this session has started. Good afternoon to everybody that's attending on the Geneva time, and good morning to all of us in North America. You're joining us for session number 3. The topic is how can public-private partnerships embrace innovation and technology? So my name is Artur Tereschuk. As some of you may know, I coordinate the WAPP Project Management Forum, and I'm the founding partner at Superset Infrastructure, leading capital advisory and transformation team. For the past 15 years of my career, I've been involved in some of Canada's largest infrastructure projects, focusing on digital transformation and enablement. Much of that experience has been with public-private partnerships, where I was responsible for leading and directing policy and technology transformation initiatives aimed at increasing public authorities' capability in project management and reporting. We've seen the evolution and the role of innovation and technology over the last decade and are excited at the contributions these initiatives can make for value for money, productivity, safety, sustainability, and meeting the carbon reduction targets through the innovation of material and construction methods. No one knows more about this than Oracle Construction and Engineering, who've been at the forefront of the construction technology solution since the inception of that market. They're also the sponsors for this session. Joining us from Oracle is Roger Rovelnick. He's the Australia, New Zealand, and Asia Customer Strategy Director at Oracle Construction and Engineering. And if Roger is with us, we'd bring him up to the panel. Roger, are you able to come up? Or Ziad, would you be able to bring Roger and give him... Ziad, he's already in the chat. He's already made a comment there. Well, Roger, if you're with us, please just post in the general chat and we'll bring you up. We can hear you, Roger. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Arthur, for that introduction, and apologies. Ironically, the technology doesn't want to play from this part of the world in the middle of the...
Oh, we seem to have lost Roger. Well, let's pick this up whenever Roger has a chance to join back. I just wanted to... Oh, Roger, you're back.
And hopefully you can see me now as well.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Apologies for that. Here we are. Thanks for that introduction and for the opportunity for a couple of minutes to talk about Oracle Construction and Engineering, which is part of Oracle that provides technology that connects project teams, empowers decision makers, and synchronizes your supply chain on a truly intelligent platform. We help owners and delivery teams work together, turn data into intelligence, and orchestrate resources for smooth project delivery. Prior to joining Oracle, I worked as a management consulting, providing lots of technical advisory services in PPPs, UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and a few other parts around the world in a variety of roles. From public sector transaction management, technical advisors, funders due diligence, independent certifiers, and working in the SPVs as well. In that time, I realized that the maturity of technology using PPPs is pretty low, and now I'm at Oracle. I'm in a position to bring my experience and combine that with technology that Oracle brings, and we can bring that maturity and standardization across the globe using technology. Oracle is very excited to work with WAPPP. We've recently joined WAPPP as corporate members, and we'd love to have the opportunity to introduce technology and Oracle to the wider PPP communities, and particularly the benefits and value that technology can bring to PPP projects. Because the technology advances in construction and engineering means that we currently are on the cusp of step change in the way construction and engineering will embrace and benefit from technology application. Infrastructure spending is essential to economic growth and rebuilding of economies, as most most parts of the world are doing at the moment, and PPP is a proven vehicle to do that in many parts of the world, restarting economic growth and bringing that development benefits straight into the economy. Success in infrastructure projects is critical to that economic success, and moreover, to deliver success in PPP projects, you need to have a good tool to manage your projects, collaborate on those, and therefore bring the successes of the projects into the communities, create the jobs, increase their consumer spending, and maximize return on investment by minimizing administrative costs, selecting the most suitable initiatives, and tracking the benefits and outcomes achieved. So how do you achieve that whilst also managing, controlling time, cost, scope, and risk? Initially direct as a project owner, and the later stages of PPP projects potentially at arm's length. Hopefully the panel can discuss some of this today, and I look forward to hearing the discussion this evening or today, your afternoon. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Roger. We're happy to have Oracle join the WAPP family, and we're looking forward to a lot more sessions in the future. I'd like to move on and make brief introductions for each one of our speakers and have them reflect on what technology and innovation and public-private partnerships means to them, and share with us what their organizations are doing to advance implementation in technology.
And I don't know what else I could do. This is really pissing me off.
Welcome, Richard. We can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to connect in.
No,
thank you.
We've got you now. I'll start off with an introduction for Dr. Alex Byrne, joining us from United Kingdom. Dr. Alex Byrne has a master's degree and PhD in physics from the University of Oxford. In his current position at Siemens Healthineers, he leads the development and the delivery of enterprise-wide mid-tech partnerships with hospitals and healthcare systems around the world. Siemens Healthineers manages over 220 technology partnerships programs in more than 30 countries across all continents.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you. And thanks, Ziad, and thanks to WAPPP for the opportunity to speak at this virtual event. It's a huge pleasure. And I'd like to acknowledge my colleague at Siemens Healthineers, Natalia Korchakova-Heeb. She's our global lead for PPPs and Greenfield Hospitals. And she's also actually a member of the steering committee for WAPPP, and she's our main sort of go-to person for PPP. So it's I know she's listening in today, and I think it's important that she gets an acknowledgement here. So as far as Siemens Healthineers is concerned, you know, throughout our very proud kind of 175 or so year history, you know, we've invested significant time and money in innovation. Into medical technology and services. So, you know, our mission to provide, you know, to pioneer breakthroughs in healthcare. That's pioneering breakthroughs in healthcare for everyone, everywhere, resonates very well with the sort of forward-looking objectives of Infrastructure 4.0 and sustainability and socio-economic goals of nearly all PPP organizations. So, you know, providing products and services into healthcare PPPs globally and as part of the sort of broader Siemens companies or family of companies, we've got this sort of proud history, proud heritage of innovation. And we've got that sort of broad and unique perspective also on how PPPs can embrace innovation and technology, which of course is the subject of this panel. But I think from our perspective, it's important to realize that this goes way beyond the innovation and technology that we as suppliers provide, right? This is about somehow providing an innovation environment to PPP projects that enables innovation to thrive at its heart. And I think that means having a very strong focus on the third P of PPP, so the partnership piece of PPP. And partnership means shared goals. it means creating additional value for stakeholders, and it means innovating together. And in fact, we in Siemens Healthineers have developed a new kind of formula for PPP, talking not only about value for money, value for people, but also value in innovation. And there it is, right there, right at the central sort of pillar of our approach is this concept of value for innovation. And I think the good news for PPP projects is that they've got one element which really supports it, and delivering this innovation platform, and that's the fact that they are long term. They're the same for long. They're probably never fully formed. They're very difficult. They're often surprising, and understanding all these dynamics is critical to their success. And I'm proud to be part of an organization that celebrates partnerships and everything that's required to make them successful, especially when it comes to innovation and technology. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Arthur.
Thank you so much, Alex. So next, I'd love to introduce Tanya Dobkins. She's joining us from Australia. Tanya has an MBA in Honors of Arts and Law with a professional background in journalism and production. Tanya has extensive experience in public, private, and not-for-profit organizations, advising on operational enhancement and risk management. Currently, Tanya is spearheading development of a new set of ISRC climate adoption tools for both economic and infrastructure resilience, and blockchain-enabled tools for PPP transparency, accountability, equity, and inclusion. Thank you so much for joining us, Tanya.
Thank you, Arthur. And I'm delighted to be part of this progressive and topical session. As you mentioned, I'm a technical advisor to WAPPP and the International Sustainable Resilience Centre, who is actually one of the sponsors of this conference. Now, the ISRC is an international organisation, and we specialise in strengthening PPPs by incorporating resilience, sustainability, and people first principles into them. So, Arthur, when it comes to your question about what innovation and technology means to ISC, well, we're on the forefront of identifying and utilising tools that can, one, advance our mission, and that can, two, change people's mindset about how spending money on resilience is an investment and not a cost. So what are we doing about it? Well, one of the key technologies we're developing and we're championing is predictive modeling and visual simulation tools. And there's several reasons why this is our focus. You know, it's a time of rapid climate change, natural disasters are intensifying, and with that, infrastructure projects and their systems, they're under pressure to deliver resilient and reliable services. So there's this need to make sure that your project is resilient. And so be it, there's also a need to ensure that your project is adequately financed. So if you want your project to be adequately financed, then you need to be able to inform investors and decision makers about the current and emergent risks associated with your project, not only from today, but 10, 20, 30 years into the future under normal conditions, and also unexpected and unlikely conditions. So this situation and this reality, it leads us to ask, well, what technology is out there that can maybe assist us in identifying future risks? What tech is out there that can help us choose appropriate risk reduction measures? And is there even a tech tool that's sophisticated enough to illustrate the impact of like emergent climate and socioeconomic variables over time? We believe the RC is predictive modeling and simulation tools. Now, the trick is, how do you go about choosing an effective modeling tool? There's generally two types of modeling tools: those that use AI, which use the past to predict the future, and those that can develop emergent scenarios. So the functions to watch out for, well, they may come up in this discussion, but at ISRC, we are developing an innovative visual predictive modeling tool that we believe will do the job just perfectly, but in particular for infrastructure resilience. So thank you, Arthur.
Very exciting work you guys are doing. Thank you so much, Tanya. From Houston, I'm happy to welcome Richard Celine, Managing Director of the Resilience Innovation Hub and Collaboratory, a national and soon-to-be international ecosystem of organizations, institutions, and strategic alliances for pre-disaster and risk mitigation resilience. Richard has over 40 years of experience in aligning corporate, academic, government, and foundation capital into new models for implementation at the national, regional, and local levels. Welcome, Richard.
Arthur, thank you. A little bit of a technology and innovation challenge this morning when I found out that my privacy and security settings would not let me get access to the platform this way. So thank you for your patience. And thank you to the entire WAPPP for hosting once again a great gathering of a lot smarter brains than I'll ever be. I do feel like I'm a small puppy up on the big porch with some smarter folks than me. And for those of you who need that to be interpreted, Tanya will interpret it for me using her fine Australian background. Let me jump into this because I'm going to come at this from a totally, maybe slightly different perspective. We've been looking at the embracing of innovation and technology in these public-private partnerships, which we actually now call P4s, private philanthropic public partnerships. Some people have added the people part of it, so it could be a P4, a P5. But the bottom line is, frankly, the challenge of unleashing innovation in technology has become frustrating to folks in the private sector and to some degree even in the philanthropic sector if we wait for governments to catch up with the application of these new tools and frankly capital solutions. So part of it, and I am going to be a little provocative, part of it is driven by the work that we've been doing looking at pre-disaster and risk mitigated resilience. That's our definition, pre-disaster and risk mitigated. When you've lost trillions of dollars around the world based on every type of peril, whether it's drought and flood, spills and leaks, fires and explosions, snow and ice, health and pandemics, you name it. The world is definitely creating not just back-to-back, but literally parallel layered types of disasters. So we started talking with the insurance and reinsurance sector around the world, who essentially have said there's just no way that they alone can cover these loss claims, number one. Number two is that there's kind of a phrase that's emerged called insurance as economic capital. And that is that most of you are fully aware, probably better aware than I'll ever be, that insurance has a definite stick or set of sticks, one of which is raising rates. The other one is abandoning markets. Both of those are highly political, but they also have a set of carrots. And those carrots include new types of insurance products, co-investing in projects, investing in the technologies and the innovations, and then third, a whole set of new bonding type of financing tools that we're working with them to unleash. One of which is what's called community private activity bonds around resilience. You may call them resilience bonds or green infrastructure bonds, but these community bonds that we're looking at as tools driven by information that Tanya raised, but it's very data-driven, very data-driven. Let me emphasize this one more time. It is very data-driven. We cannot escape the facts that there are certain places in the world where the risk of both financial, economic, societal, and disaster risk all are aligning. And at this point, with that data clearly indicating where resources can be positioned, where different types of projects can come together. So what we found is it's no longer the corporate social responsibility angle of making us feel well about ESG or societal benefits, that it really is coming down to the CFOs and COOs of major corporations, major businesses, governments, and all of this capital that's suddenly available. So last but not least, Arthur, is we look at this as a 3x3 matrix, a 3x3 matrix. Technology and equipment, data science, alternative capital, and then applied to what we call leveraged assets, How do you convert assets that already exist in your communities to work in a much more optimal way for resilience and sustainability and green? Retrofits. How do I take my infrastructure, whatever size and scale it is, to retrofit it? And then finally, how do we once and for all introduce new design, new engineering, and new construction into the new infrastructure that we need? And it's not all concrete and rebar. So thank you for allowing me to at least raise a couple of flags.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Richard. Lastly, joining us from Singapore, is Cedric Jotet. Cedric is the co-founder and CEO of InfraBlocks, a Singapore-based technology company developing blockchain solutions for sustainability finance, including ESG and carbon markets. Over the last decade, Cedric worked on PPPs and project finance initiatives across energy, health, transportation, and social sectors with the World Bank, the French Development Agency, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and BNP Paribas, covering over 50 countries globally. Welcome, Cedric.
Thanks, Arthur. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this event organized by WAPPP, and thank you again for having InfraBlocks to participate and to be able to raise our voice. So maybe as way of introduction, InfraBlocks is a sustainability-focused technology company. So typically it's a fintech startup. We are based in Singapore, and what we do is that we leverage blockchain technology and cryptocurrency to bring more efficiency and more transparency to the climate finance industry. Today, we have two main solutions. In fact, one focused on carbon markets, whereby we digitize the process of carbon credit issuance, and we tokenize carbon credits in the form of non-fungible tokens, what we call NFTs. And the second one is related to ESG reporting and M&E focused, so monitoring and evaluation, where we use digital technology and blockchain to be able to monitor data from climate finance assets and to be able to report in real time and to bring more efficiency and transparency. So before talking a bit about PPPs, I just wanted to take a step back and to say a few words on our methodology in terms of innovation. So innovation is a core thing at InfraBlocks, and it's really what we what we try to do every day, to try to find the the new innovation. And the way we do it is like we always start from the problem and the challenge that we see in the market. So it can be in all sorts of PPPs across sectors, and based on this challenge, we try to see how blockchain and cryptocurrency can add value and how it can bring benefits for all the stakeholders. So I just wanted to mention this point. I think it's very important today, especially in blockchain, where sometimes we can see technology as a nice to have, and it's very important to have, in fact, technology really solving a problem. And so in the case of PPPs, so we are working on a few PPPs, and in fact, I'm sure we will deep dive during the session later on, but we have seen quite a few interesting areas to work on, and we currently have a few projects on this. I think the first one is really around monetization of PPPs, how we can monetize, and provide access to liquidity for PPPs, and also how we can monetize impact. And I heard some very interesting things from our other panelists on everything related to data. Data-driven methodologies and around data monitoring. So this is the first one. I think the second one is related to transparency in PPPs. Since it's a partnership between the public and the private sector, it's very important to have transparent mechanisms. And I think the last one, and I think it's Tanya who was mentioning a bit around this, around prediction and risk analysis. I think it's a real opportunity for PPPs where typically a PPP is a risk mitigation tool between the private sector and the public sector, whereby the public sector will transfer some risk to the private sector. And to be able to do it in a good way, it's very important to be able to assess this risk and to do so I mean, it's something which is very challenging without the access to data, especially in emerging markets or fragile countries where you don't have a kind of infrastructure with data access, which can be done very easily. So these are these few things I wanted to to mention before we start to deep dive into discussions. And yeah, thanks again for having InfraBlocks, and looking forward to very interesting discussions.
Thank you so much, Cedric. We're happy to have you. So I'd like to thank everybody for their introductions. For the second half of the panel, I'd like to have a conversation on the evolving role of information and innovation in public-private partnerships. And I'd like, since there's a lot of participants, please keep your responses brief. We'd love to hear from all of you. And I'd like to remind anybody who's watching this session that there is a questions option in your chat box. It's the second option from the left. Feel free to submit questions, and if we have time, we'd absolutely be happy to answer them or have any of the panelists answer them. So first question for Cedric. How is technology and innovation, in your experience, enabling P3s? And could you provide some examples of where you're seeing this? And if I may preface this with my experience with construction and engineering technologies, we're seeing a lot of public owners move in and move into solutions, Oracle being one of them, that allow them the management and oversight tools, business processes, and reporting, and actually support the development, construction, operation, and maintenance of these assets and of these projects. So it's a very, very active sector in North America and Europe and globally, to be honest. And it's a step in the right direction. What are your thoughts on this, Cedric?
Thanks, Arthur. So yeah, I think it's a very, very important question to start with. And maybe I think what's interesting is to get back, in fact, to the definition and to the concept of PPPs and the fundamental of PPPs. So typically, why we have PPPs, why it adds value for the public sector, but also for the private sector, and what are the different stakeholders involved. I think the first component is related to, and I think it's Alex who was mentioning it in the intro, related to partnership. So PPP is the key value is a partnership between the public and the private sector, and as part of this partnership, there is usually the notion of trust, which in the case of PPPs, the trust is kind of codified with agreements and contracts and a contractual structure. So, if we take an example of, for instance, in the energy sector, if you have a cross-border project in energy, in fact, we have one of our projects, in fact, in Bhutan, between India and Bhutan, which is a hydropower project on which we are currently working on. So if you take this kind of project, it can become very complex with many stakeholders involved. So you can have two governments involved. Within each government, you will have several layers of ministries. And even from the private sector, you would have the EPC contractors, the O&M operators, the lenders, the insurance providers. So it can become quite an ecosystem which can become challenging. And what we see in PPPs today is that everything is still paper-based. While the world is moving towards digitization, the feeling that I have, it's like everything remains kind of paper-based. And in fact, the PPPs are not maybe leveraging all the value and the efficiencies that can bring digital technologies for the procurement side. And maybe to give an example on, so for instance, on the blockchain work that we are currently carrying out. And in fact, it's something that is already happening in Singapore or Dubai, for instance, whereby the public authorities are partnering with the private sector through a digitized platform, an online platform, whereby there is a decentralized ledger and everyone can have access to the data. The data is shared transparently, and you have smart contracts so that the agreements are automated. I think it's something which is kind of missing. And after, maybe I don't want to be too long, so to give the,
so
the floor.
Cedric, we did have a question that came in, and the question was in regards to cryptocurrency volatility. How do you, within the framework in which you operate, do you manage that volatility?
Yeah, thanks. So I see we have like the very, very great questions from the start. So definitely it's great. So in fact, this is the main challenge, I would say, for crypto and digital currencies today. So I mean, my personal view on this is that today you have two kinds of digital currencies. There is one which is mainstream, the crypto like Bitcoin, Ethereum that we see, and which are developed by communities. This is one. That's the one we see in the media. And there is one on the other side, which is backed by central banks. And if you look at today, what's happening is like all the central banks are launching their own central bank backed currencies. And in fact, I think the trend that we will see is that, in fact, these kind of national or supranational currencies might become the ones which will be used in this type of PPPs. And there is room here for stability. And I think the person asking the questions might have in mind what happened to Luna, which was supposed to be a stable coin. And a few days ago, it kind of crashed and lost 70% or up to 90% of the value. So yeah, so crypto, there is still some room to do, but I think the innovation, the value of the innovation is really here.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. Question number 2 is for Tanya. What are you seeing as primary barriers to implementation of technology and innovation, and what are we doing to overcome these challenges?
Thanks, Arthur. I'm seeing about 5 different barriers at the moment. The first one is a fundamental. It comes down to our perspective. You know, we're in a complex emerging world, and we need to accept that the world isn't certain, it's not stagnant. And so if we take that perspective, we'll be more open to choosing technologies that are keeping pace with the reality. A simple example of this is building a road. You know, you would think that we don't need to be too innovative here, but, you know, cement doesn't last forever. It has a design life of about 40 years. So it will need to be replaced. So now those decision makers have to change their perspective, and they now need to start looking at green concrete, for example. Second barrier is the cost of green technology. You know, unless it's the same cost or less, then it's not going to be widely adopted or diffused. To overcome this, you know, the clean tech needs to become prevalent. It needs to scale. This will lead others to develop and build infrastructure, which is required to power countries from renewable energy sources. And of course, the price will start to decrease. A third barrier I'm seeing is past unfortunate experience. Now, you get this a lot in projects which use different technologies in their software and their hardware. So then they're unable to communicate or share data reliably. So there's this fear, like not to implement another innovative system in case it doesn't work. So to overcome this, well, first you need to identify whether your project is standalone or if it's a system of systems. Now, if it's the latter, you need to get the design architecture right. And one way of doing that is you can mandate in your tender process that all technology needs to be able to talk to each other, and you need to have a standard communication system. And the way to do this is to ensure you have what we call a plug and play system ability with your technology. And what I mean by this is you set up an architecture where you can share your data digitally, but you don't integrate the components. And by doing this, you save yourself time, you save yourself costs and a headache. Because, for example, if you had a submarine and one part of that was failing, with a plug and play, you could take that out, you could do its own testing and acceptance, put it back in. But without a plug and play system, you would have to retest everything, which could take years and cost millions. A fourth barrier is the organization of a culture. And an example of this is when you bring digital tech into maintenance type projects or mining. Because when you bring digital tech in, suddenly it changes what data and information is available and how it is available, which means more often than not, like the operating model and the contracts, they need to change. Now, a great example of this is a mine in Australia, where they were paying miners based on their tonnage. Now, this had the unexpected result of miners wearing their machines out in a bid to get as much as weight as they could. When they put in digital tech, all of a sudden you could track the machine movements every single day. Now, this resulted in the operators changing the reward system. So now you were rewarded on tonnage, less the cost of maintenance to the machine. So it brings me back to those barriers, because there can be a resistance from staff, from contractors, from operators, even lawyers and financiers who are going to have to learn, new deal structures. The last barrier is it's always, how do you go about choosing like an effective and appropriate technology? And so I'll give an example of choosing a simulation and predictive modeling tool. We know that simulations are great. They provide insight. They lay out a whole new world. They ask us how we would respond. However, we must be really astute and ask the question, well, who designed the simulation? Because the idea that one designer could systemically know what the future holds, well, that's absurd. So for any predictive modeling tool to be effective, it needs to be systemic. It needs to also be bespoke for your project, the city, the country, the network, the end user. And it also needs to be evidence-based, because, for instance, how can you make infrastructure assets more systemically resilient if you don't have appropriate and available data on the spatial distribution of those natural hazards? Well, you can't. So in the sense of simulations to overcome this, you need a tool that's based on complexity, that incorporates your infrastructure and your systemic GIS, that incorporates geospatial data, economic and demographic data, and that also will deliver an outcome that can be understood by stakeholders, which, lastly, I'll quickly say another barrier is that some tech is just not user-friendly. So it's a barrier, even if you have access to the data and the tools and the innovative technology. Well, do you have the skills and the competencies to make use of them? And will it actually lead and assist you to making better and more informed decisions? Thank you, Arthur.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that response. Next question. Next question is for Dr. Alex Byrne. Tanya and Cedric, please feel free to chime in. So what principal initiatives are you seeing as most promising in advancing adoption of technology in the market? And could you provide some examples of their impact?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm going to answer this question very much from a sort of healthcare perspective, but I think many of so there's a sort of an analog that I think will wash over into other industries. One of the interesting things about adopting technology reminds me of the sort of funny story you hear occasionally where you get lost when you're driving around a city or something, and you get lost and you ask someone the way to where you want to get to, and they say to you, well, I'm not sure, but if I were you, I wouldn't start from here. And with technology adoption, I think that's sometimes the case. We get very bogged down, I think, in our own sort of perceptions of industry and so on, own way of doing things. And it's sometimes difficult to advance adoption of technology just because of our history. And of course, in emerging markets, especially, these are markets where they're keen to use technology right from the outset. So designing something immediately for successful use and for some form of future proofing, which some of the more mature innovation markets perhaps can't accommodate. So in healthcare, I think I see three big areas of technology adoption. One is in the use of AI tools. So Tanya mentioned this a little bit earlier on. So this is all about increasing scale and decreasing costs by using AI and machine learning to do things, in some cases, to do things which otherwise take a very long time or involve a lot of people. And in other cases are simply not possible, in terms of analyzing vast amounts of data in an effective way. The other area which we're seeing emerging very, very strongly is the idea of remote services. So these are services that can be centralized in a remote location, or carried out in a remote location by people with appropriate skills, which may not be available at the point where the services are required. And then finally, it's about robotics. It's about using either remote operation of machines or automatic operation of machines to carry out otherwise sort of human-centric tasks. And then just finally, one sort of remark, picking up on something I mentioned in the introduction again, is, you know, the idea that, and it's come up a couple of times I've noticed in the chat, the idea that technology is changing fast, and how do we in a long-term program take care of the fact that, you know, technology is changing fast and needs to be adopted quickly. And I think that's about, you know, finding the right partners to kind of ride this wave of change, and to make the change management associated with the adoption of technology a central part of what we do. Not to be frightened of it, but as I say, to try and ride that wave of change, and make change management an enjoyable experience rather than a pain, which it quite often ends up being.
No, I appreciate that, Alex. If from the construction infrastructure perspective, I may add a lot. So the private sector looks to the public sector to set the way and set the standards. And what we're seeing is the public sector, with the Victoria Digital Asset Strategy, with some of the initiatives that are happening in UK, are beginning to set those requirements for the development, construction, and operation and maintenance in terms of what they want to see. As far as data is concerned, they want to prepare the infrastructure where those assets will be plugged in that are going to be developed by the private sector. And that is, I think, developing of national and international frameworks that technology will then adopt and follow. Are those steps in the right direction? And they'll lead us to the high accuracy, high frequency of construction management transactions, something that Cedric deals with. Cedric, did you have anything to add to this question? What are you seeing as most promising? I guess your whole field is most promising. This is the future, right?
Promising, but also risky. And that's why I wanted also to react to some of the question or the comments in the chat, which are very interesting and in fact related also to your question. And I see a lot of comments around technology and how technology can be, kind of early stage innovative technology can be used in PPPs, which are on the other side kind of long-term structure where we need to have, the risk, which is kind of, like structured and mitigated. So I think for us, and in fact, when we mention technology and innovation, we don't see as being the core of the PPP, but more a tool which will help increase the readiness of the PPP projects in terms of either impact, in terms of performance, or even to bring new tools in terms of, for instance, liquidity access. And if I can provide maybe one or two examples which sound very exciting, and also we are exploring at InfraBlocks. I think the first one is the emergence of results-based financing, or like you have like social impact bonds, green bonds, and so result-based financing, which can be applied to PPPs typically because it's a public-private partnership, and you have a need of being able to assess the performance of your project in terms of financial performance, but also social impact, environmental impact, in a very proactive manner, very granular way, and to be able to do it fast. So you have to do it fast, and also you have to be able to predict what can go wrong, and you have a kind of several inputs. And in an ideal way, it's like if one of the inputs of your product goes wrong, you need very rapidly to be able to react and to be able to take action. So in this way, I think like the technology we are trying to work on, which is kind of digital platform based on blockchain, and also, as I think Tanya was mentioning earlier, if you include some predictive tools, either based on artificial intelligence or machine learning, you can have some instruments which can be applied for PPPs and which can kind of improve the readiness of the performance of the project. So I think that's really where the innovation is. And for instance, on our side, we are working on this, especially on the social side. So for instance, we have one of the projects which is very high impact, and typically it's a relocation of fragile populations living in slums, which are being relocated in affordable housing. So in this case, it's all about data, and you need to be able to do it transparently. You need to be able to have a very granular access, and it can be like very high impact.
No, fantastic. Thank you for that response. I'd like to do a time check. We have about 15 minutes left, and 2 more questions. My next question would be for Richard, Celine, and then I'd like to leave 10 minutes for a general question for all of the participants. So Richard, we have 5 minutes with you, and just wanted to ask you, how does this technology contribute to development of community engagement and benefits? And talk about people within public-private partnership.
So let me kind of draw a thread through the other co-panelist, Arthur. We are increasingly, I think all of us are increasingly realizing that we can now measure non-concrete and rebar, non-physical types of benefits from these projects. And what I mean by that is, let's use something that Cedric and Alex talked about, Tanya, not taking away from some of the measurements that you've been capturing. But look, the reality is that if we are going to align with ESG and green and climate-related goals, they have to be something that can actually not only be measured as a benefit, but frankly, and again, trying to be somewhat provocative, we could talk about the economic and social, Arthur, but we need to be talking straight up about the financial and the investment side.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for this. There has to be a return on the investment. Now, the investment can be, rationalized about how much the return is going to be. But I think one of the realities is that, and let me use an example. We have a lot of fires and explosions around these chemical and plastic facilities. They're not just in Houston, they're around the world, right? So not only are they shutting down the ports and the seaways and shutting down the facilities from their business continuity and operation side. Think of this about business continuity. But what they're also doing is creating ancillary social challenges for air and water quality, which means now I've got not just the physical plant, but I've got the people part of it. And you could be the most hard-nosed, hardened individual in the world and sit there and go, I'm sorry, but they just need to move or relocate or get out of the way. And I'm not joking. We all hear these conversations in private. But the reality is that those are the employees, those are the workforce, those are the individuals that drive that sense of community. And so I think what we're now realizing, all of us are now realizing, is that the ability to align the metrics, the performance, the impact is an investable tool. So I'll shut up on this part, Arthur. We now see 3 deltas. I got the first delta that says I've lost $1.5 trillion on the U.S. Gulf Coast due to every kind of disaster you could imagine. Then I introduce a new form of delivering the PPP, new technology, new equipment, new design, and now I can forecast very strongly that at the end of the day, I'm going to reduce the future loss claims. But not just the future loss claims for the insurers, whether it's a government or private, Arthur. I'm reducing the loss of life, the health outcomes. So we now know there's 3 deltas, and I can invest now in all 3 of those deltas, especially this quote unquote soft side that shows that in the long term, my community is going to benefit. So last part, Arthur, and this is where I think we need to, I want to kind of throw a piece in. I got what the role of government is. I've dealt with all the different levels of government. It's the private sector and philanthropy that are coming together with more money than governments can come up with at all. And as a result of that, in a sense, the demand from the private sector and philanthropy is for the governments to identify ways to do these tenders, do these procurements that don't force I jokingly say, Arthur, you want to move sand from here to there? Let me come up with the best way to do that. Don't tell me that the wagon needs to be this long, the handle needs to be this long, the wheels need to be. Let me unleash measurable innovation to get you the outcomes you want.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Richard. And one thing I do completely agree with is what we're seeing, and I think UK and Australia are the forefront of this, is as you inject people, community, and community benefits into the P3 equation, there is a necessity to manage these benefits and make sure that they're realized. So asset value now, whether it be transportation or public infrastructure, hospitals or subways, the value of that particular project is going to far exceed the actual value of construction, because you're building in a lot of the community benefits and everything in around it. So my last question is to all of the panelists, and I'd like to go in order of Alex, Tanya, Cedric, and Richard. And that question is, what are the takeaways that you'd like to share with the participants of this forum that they may take back and apply in their life and in their projects and their organizations?
Thank you, Arthur. So for me, Richard wrote something in the chat that resonated very strongly, actually, and it's getting the idea that this concept of innovation, this isn't just something that's done by scientists, right? This is something that's done by groups of people using the products, the resources that they have at their disposal to do things in genuinely different and creative ways for the betterment of the project, for the betterment of the environment, for the stakeholders concerned. And that means thinking about three things. It means thinking about partnership, and thinking about partnership. So I believe the key takeaway from me, at least, is please think about how you partner when you want to create an innovative environment, when you want to create innovation at the core of a PPP.
Thank you for that, Alex. Tanya?
Thanks, Arthur. I think as professionals, we need to understand that there's a range of tech out there that can assist us in all stages of PPPs. So if we're in a position to utilize that tech, then we need to understand, what are the options available? Is it fit or unfit for us for what your objective is? And is it easy to use? And in terms of being fit or unfit and appropriate in the simulation and predictive modeling context, we have prominent organizations such as World Bank confirming the importance of the need to be able to experiment, to stress test and evaluate the utilization of risk reduction strategies and to assess their impact. So there's this acceptance, that running scenarios of failures is the first and most critical step in defining contingency plans. So, in terms of getting a fit or unfit tech, if you're going to choose a predictive modeling tool, then you need one that can do that, can stress test your options for a variety of risks, under the normal conditions and the really unlikely ones in 10, 20 or 30 years. So in ending, I'm happy to talk about more with that. So I'm with David Dodd, who heads up the organization of the ISRC. So he'll be chatting on Friday. David Baxter was on Wednesday. And another sponsor of this event, Ansarado, is demoing live tech on Wednesday as well. So thank you, Arthur.
Fantastic. Thank you. Cedric?
Thanks, Arthur. So before to conclude, I wanted to start with a heads up and to acknowledge Jyoti Bisbay, who I saw was in the audience. She might have left now, but a big thank you to Jyoti. So for the story, I was part of the IFC PPP team before. So before I left, in fact, to launch the startup, and Jyoti was part before on the World Bank PPP team, in fact. So yeah, a big thank you to Jyoti. And maybe so just to reply to your comment, I think the takeaway that I would like to give is more. It's something we did not have time to discuss in depth, but it's more around the methodology. And I see between the world of tech and innovation and the world of PPPs, which is mainly driven by governments and development finance institutions or international institutions. In terms of methodology, you see a kind of gap where, you know, on the tech side, we work in what we call the lean methodology, or I'm sure everyone has already read the Lean Startup book, and also what has been written after, which is called the Lean Impact, whereby you have an idea, you see an innovation, you start with a small a proof of concept, and after you move to the minimum viable product, and you go step by step like this, and you learn on the mistakes that you do, and it's a good thing to have assumptions and to do mistakes. In fact, if you are able to so not to crash the project, and to correct and to learn and to test the assumptions. On the other side, I think on the PPPs and also within the governments, there is maybe a different culture. Where you usually have big initiatives with big announcements and the budget which has to be locked in within the PPP units or before. So and in fact, even for us as InfraBlocks, when we launch initiatives with the public sector, it takes a bit of time, to explain what's a POC, how we do these things. So yeah, I think the key takeaway would be maybe in terms of methodology, in terms of mindset as well, how we can align all these things and work towards success on this.
I appreciate
Thanks.
that, Cedric. Thanks you very much. Richard.
We have more capital than we've ever seen. We have more data than we've ever seen. And we have more technology than we've ever seen. Therefore, done, check mark. Let's call this a victory and go home. What really is the issue that, to me, I'm encouraging the Congress attendees to look at, and it follows on to my previous panelist. Part of P3s have always been had an underlying principle of transferring risk, right? That's not it anymore. I'm not gonna pick up your risk if you're not really willing to do something about it with your government resources, government infrastructure, government solutions. At the same time, me on the private sector, if I don't stand up and do certain things, change my design, change where. So I think we're moving from risk transfer to shared risk. And that changes the nature of both the product that we're designing, but also how we use capital data and technology. So Cedric, brother, I agree with you. We need pilots and demonstrations. We're trying to launch what we call resiliency zones in the United States, which are like opportunity zones, but this is really to unleash a lot more capital, a lot more new types of governance structures. The challenge, I think all of us, as especially those who have been at this in places around the world, frankly, you all around the world can teach us a lot in the United States and vice versa about how to, and I call it the 5 A's, because you always got to come up with something here. 5 A's: assessing, adapting, adopting, acquiring, and aligning. And the problem is that the challenges that we're all facing around the world, whether it's food deserts, health issues, what we're seeing as a result of climate change, these are things that are not just persistent, they're urgent. Therefore, I think what we've got to do is collectively, as a group, as an organization, really work with the tools that we have through World Bank, IFC, but
Absolutely.
frankly, to the insurance world and others, Arthur, to unleash pilots this year.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for that insight, Richard. I'd like to wrap up the session, but before I do, I see there's a number of questions that we didn't get to. I welcome everybody to join the Oracle booth or to enter around in the chat and engage and have these questions answered. And I would like to thank our panelists for this engaging discussion and our global audience for your attention. We'll make the replay of this session available upon the conclusion of the Congress. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Arthur.
Ciao.
Thank you all.